Okay, thank you. So today we will be discussing about the diagnosis and management of abnormal uterine bleeding. A very good afternoon, everyone. A hot summer. Hope all of you are enjoying your home stays and also studying hard. What is abnormal uterine bleeding? That is AUB. In a poetic language, we can say that it is a shattered cry of a diseased uterus. Before we start learning the abnormal uterine bleeding, we should know what is normal. So what is the normal menstrual pattern? It's quite varied in duration, amount of flow, that is the volume of bleeding, the regularity of the cycles, and the frequency of the cycles. So the normal range varies over a large period or a large variation. And anything more varying from this, we call it as abnormal uterine bleeding. So what is the duration? What is the normal duration of a menstrual flow? If it is less than 4.5 days, we call it as a shortened. And if it is more than 8 days, we call it as a prolonged menstrual bleeding. That means in between 4.5 to 8 days is the normal menstrual duration. What is the amount of flow? Between 5 to 80 ml is a normal flow. If the flow is less than 5 ml, we call as the decreased flow. And if it is more than 80 ml, we call it as a heavy menstrual bleeding. Okay? So the heavy menstrual bleeding, it can be in the flow or it can be even in the duration. So it more varies around the duration of more than 8 days. In the previous definitions, we used to call it as menorrhagia. But now the terminologies have changed and now we call it as a, if the bleeding is more than 80 ml, we call it as a heavy menstrual bleeding. Regularity between, if the cycles are less than 20 days variation in 12 months, then we call that the cycles are regular. It means to comment about the regularity of the cycles, we have to evaluate or we have to ask the history of last 12 months cycles. And if the last 12 month cycles, they are varying for less than 20 days, then we call it as a regular menstrual cycle pattern. But if they are varying for more than 20 days, for example, in one cycle, she is bleeding for 20 days. In another cycle, she is bleeding for 40 days. In another cycle, she is bleeding for 60 days. So that becomes a irregular menstrual cycles. And the frequency, if less than 24 days, it means the patient's menstrual cycles are coming more frequently. Okay, so we call them as frequent menstrual cycles. That means the duration between the two cycles is less than 24 days. And if the cycles duration between the two cycles is more than 38 days, we call it as infrequent cycles. This was previously termed as oligomenorrhea and polymenorrhea. But now these terms are no more used and the terms used are frequent menstrual cycles and infrequent menstrual cycles. Okay, so this is something about the normal menstrual pattern. If anything goes away from this, then we call it as a abnormal menstrual pattern or abnormal uterine bleeding. Before we go for the bleeding problems, we have to recall just a blood supply of the uterus. Okay, so as we all know, uterus is a very vascular organ. It has got a tremendous increase in the vascularity during pregnancy and it comes back to its normalcy. But because it has to feed the uterus and the fetus later on, the uterus is very rich in blood supply. Okay, so here you can see on two sides there are two uterine arteries which are supplied. The lower part of the cervix and the vagina, they are supplied by vaginal arteries, and the upper part, that is the cornual part, has got a supply from the anastomosis with the ovarian arteries also. Okay, so ovarian arteries, uterine arteries, and vaginal arteries. Okay, all of them together, they supply the uterus, cervix, and the upper part of the vagina. Okay, in the cut sections, if we can see, these are the uterine arteries. They are divided into arcuate arteries. These arcuate arteries, then they are sending the radial branches which penetrate the myometrium, okay, to reach the epithelial layer. So this is the endometrial functional zone. This is the basal zone, and here it's the these are piercing through the myometrium. Okay, so these radial branches, then they convert into the spiral arteries, and in the functional zone of the endometrium, then they give rise to small capillary networks here, and these capillaries, they are ultimately supplying the epithelial lining. Okay, so this is the pattern of the endometrial blood supply. How normally the menstrual blood flow stops? So there are 3-4 mechanisms by which this blood supply stops. The first mechanism is vasoconstriction. That is, we have seen that this is the rich blood supply. If there is vascular contraction, there is vasoconstriction at this level, at the level of radial and the spiral arteries, which are under the control of the hormones. Okay, you'll see that they are under the control of the local hormone prostaglandin. Okay, so vasoconstriction is dependent upon the balance between the 4 prostaglandins, that is the prostacyclin, thromboxane, and the prostaglandin E2 and F2. Okay, now the platelet aggregation and clot formation. Okay, so this is the routine method of stoppage of bleeding from any of the capillaries, that is platelet aggregation and clot formation. The same works over in the uterine endometrium also, and this balance is also dependent upon the prostaglandin balance. The third mechanism is myometrial contractions. We have seen that these vessels, they are penetrating through the myometrium. Okay, and in the myometrium, as all of you know, they are in the form of figure of 8. Okay, so in between the myometrial fibers, the vessels are locked. So the myometrial contraction, if it is good, then the bleeding will be decreased. But if the regularity of the myometrium is lost by any of the reasons, most commonest reason is the uterine myometrial tumors called as fibroids. Okay, then this myometrial contraction will be hampered, and then the bleeding during the menstrual cycle will be more. And the fourth one is the endometrial regeneration. Okay, so if the endometrium gets regenerated, then these bleeding capillaries will be covered by the growing endometrium, and then the bleeding stops. And this endometrial regeneration is dependent on the balance of the hypothalamo-pituitary-ovarian axis and the hormonal integrity, that is estrogen and progesterone. These are the 4 mechanisms by which normally the menstruation stops, the menstrual blood flow stops. Anything goes wrong in any of these 4 mechanisms may lead to, hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the 4 mechanisms, if they go vary or they become problematic at any point, and that will result into abnormal uterine bleeding. Now, how the abnormal uterine bleeding is classified? Okay, it is depending upon their etiologies, and the new system which is given by FIGO, okay, in is nowadays what we are using. Okay, so what is this system? The system says that the abnormal uterine bleeding is divided into 2 compartments. One is the structural problems, and another is the non-structural causes for AUB. So the structural causes, they are discrete in nature. They can be measured visually with imaging techniques and or histopathology. And so that is the PALM part of the classification. So this classification is called as PALM, PALM, and Cohen, C-O-E-R-N. So Palm Cohen classification. So what is included in this Palm part is the polyps, the endometrial polyps. A stands for adenomyosis, L stands for leiomyoma, that is the fibroids, and the M stands for the malignancy and the endometrial hyperplasia. So these are all the structural problems in the uterus which may lead to abnormal uterine bleeding. And what are the non-structural causes? These are the entities which are not defined by imaging or histopathology. And actually this group was initially called as DUB, dysfunctional uterine bleeding. That means when there is no palpable pelvic pathology, that means there is no structural problem in the uterus. That group we used to call initially as DUB, but according to the recent classification or the nomenclature, this group is called as non-structural causes or Cohen group. What is included in this is coagulopathy for C, ovulatory dysfunction O, the endometrial problems like endometritis, it is E. I is iatrogenic, for example, when there is insertion of IUCDs or by consumption of some drugs, mainly the hormonal drugs, that is included in the iatrogenic category, and N is not defined. So for if we don't find any of these 8 causes and still the patient is having abnormal uterine bleeding, we include that patient into N category. Okay, so this is Palm Cohen classification for abnormal uterine bleedings, and this entity we initially used to call it as the dysfunctional uterine bleeding group. How to proceed? Once we are seeing the patient or comes for abnormal uterine bleeding, it is the most commonest gynecological complaint with which patient comes to the gynecopedy. So once she comes, then we have to follow certain protocols to go for diagnosis and evaluation of such patients. So first part is the thorough history taking. Okay, so it is said that almost 90% of the cases, the cause can be diagnosed only on history. Then we'll go for preliminary assessment, that is the preliminary examination, per abdominal, per speculum, per vaginal examination, and then we'll have to proceed for the investigations. So now what is the history? What history we are supposed to ask in a patient of abnormal uterine bleeding? The first and foremost will be the menstrual pattern. And these are the 5 things which we are supposed to ask. What are they? Duration, amount, cycle length, regularity, and intermenstrual bleeding. So all the 5 components, 4 components we have seen in the previous slides. These are the normal variations we know, and anything going vary from this variations will be abnormal uterine bleeding. The 5th thing which we have to ask is the intermenstrual bleeding, okay, which is not related with the menstrual cycle but occurring. Usually it is in the form of spotting or minimum amount of bleeding, not a very heavy bleeding. Okay. Now next thing which will be asked is about the pain, associated pain during the menstrual pattern also, and intermittent pain also. So it is either the dysmenorrhea, type of dysmenorrhea, that is either spasmodic or congestive. Spasmodic usually starts on the first day of the menstrual cycle and it continues for 2 or 3 days. And the congestive, it usually precedes the onset of menstrual cycle. It is usually a dull aching and a heavy feeling in the lower abdomen. Maybe the intensity may vary from mild to severe, but usually it disappears after day 1 of the cycle. The second is the intermenstrual chronic pain. So in between, if the patient is having pain in abdomen, and dyspareunia, that is difficulty or that is actually pain during coitus. It can be a superficial or a deep dyspareunia. We have to evaluate it by history. Then concomitant medications. If the patient is receiving some of the medications, what are the important medications which we have to ask in the history? These are anticoagulants. For example, patients with heart disease, they are on long-term anticoagulants. Patients with cerebrovascular accidents or patients are having thromboembolic diseases, they are on anticoagulants. Second is tamoxifen. The patients of infertility, they are many times the patients of cancers, like for example, patients with breast malignancies, they may be on the drugs like tamoxifen. Then hormonal contraceptives. whether they are taking the contraceptive regularly, irregular intake of ossipils is a very common condition which can lead to abnormal uterine bleeding pattern. Antidepressants and antipsychotics, because they interfere with the hormonal milieu and of the secretion of FSH and LH from the pituitary, because they many a times they are anti-pituitary drugs. Okay, then the corticosteroids, local action on adrenals. Okay, so there may be variations in the levels of estrogen in the patients who are taking corticosteroids. So all these will come under our iatrogenic group of AUB. Okay, and then specifically we have to ask about the history of bleeding diastasis in past history, PCOS, and thyroid disorders. So this is a thorough history which we need to go for before we find out the cause for DEB. Then second will be about the examination. So what we are supposed to examine? General examination, color, weight is very important. Features suggestive of PCOS like hirsutism, then the blackening of the neck, then having the acne. So these all things we have to note down, and thyroid disorders. And thyroid swelling is there. There is edema. There is obesity, increased weight gain. So all these things we have to go for assessing for on the general examination, and specifically on abdominal examination, the lower abdomen, that is in the hypogastric region where there is palpable uterus, on per speculum examination, presence of any cervical lesions and discharge, and on per vaginal examination, we have to go for noting the uterine size, the contour of the uterus, the consistency of the uterus, tenderness over the uterus, any palpable adnexal mass or tenderness. So this is the preliminary assessment of examination in a case of AUB. And then preliminary investigations. So they are in the 4 compartments. Okay, the laboratory testings will be there, the imaging techniques will be used, specialized tests may be required, and the endometrial histopathology may be required, if not in all patients, but some may require it. Okay, so this is the diagnosis and evaluation of abnormal uterine bleeding. Now for imaging, we have got 3 imaging techniques available. One is ultrasound, second is MRI, and third is hysteroscopy. Now we'll see what are the advantages and disadvantages of all of them. Okay, in ultrasound again we have got 3 techniques. One is the Doppler ultrasound, 3D ultrasound, and SIS, that is saline infusion sonography. Okay, then this may be required. So now where we require Doppler? When we are suspecting any AV malformation, that is arteriovenous malformations in the uterus, cases of malignancies and fibroids. Okay, so in these patients we may require Doppler ultrasound apart from the routine ultrasound. Where we require 3D ultrasound, this is mainly for fibroids, because there we have to go for fibroid mappings and any other intramyometrial lesions if they are there, especially when we have to plan for conservative treatment modalities. Okay, and saline infusion sonography is mainly for the intracavitary lesions, mainly the endometrial polyps. Okay, so when we have to differentiate the endometrial polyps, we have to go for saline infusion sonography. MRI, it is usually required for fibroid patients when we go for conservative surgeries or for embolization procedures, and to differentiate between the fibroids and adenomyomas. Again, here also when we are going for the conservative management, we require MRI. So that's why it is not a mandatory investigation. It is always an optional investigation required in specific conditions of the specific patterns of abnormal uterine bleeding. Third is the hysteroscopy. Hysteroscopy is direct visualization of the endometrial cavity, and this is also mainly needed whenever we want to differentiate the malignant and the benign polyps. Okay, not for all other purposes. And again, whenever we are planning for conservative surgeries, we require hysteroscopic evaluation of the endometrial cavity for the diagnosis of cause of abnormal uterine bleeding. So here, USG should be done in AUB to evaluate uterus, adnexa, and endometrial thickness. This is a routine ultrasound. What we are doing is a routine pelvic ultrasound. It maybe transabdominal or transvaginal, but transvaginal is always better. It can be omitted in less than 40 years of patients up to 6 months. Okay, of medical treatment. But later on, if not cured with the medical management, then we may have to go for. Okay. What are the lab tests? Lab tests recommended are mainly the CBC. Okay, because we want to assess the amount of blood loss, the status of anemia in all these patients. So it is the must investigation for all types of AUB. That is CBC, and that CBC should be along with platelets. Okay, platelet count, because the idiopathic thrombocytopenias, acquired thrombocytopenias, coagulation disorders, all will be important to be evaluated. And so CBC with platelets is must. The second important thing is, in all the childbearing age patients, we have to rule out the pregnancy and its complications, like incomplete abortions and vesicular molds. Okay, so in all these patients, we have to rule out the pregnancy by doing human beta HCG, beta human chorionic gonadotropin. Okay, so either by ultrasound we have to rule out, and if we are not sure about it, then we have to go for beta HCG estimation. TSH is must. Okay, so when clinically indicated thyroid disorder is there, TSH, the total profile has to be done. But for screening the thyroid disorders, we may just go for TSH levels. Okay, and for coagulation evaluation, disorder evaluation, we want bleeding time, platelets, prothrombin time, partial thromboplastin time, and specifically all these investigations are indicated in adolescent age group and the abnormal uterine bleedings. Okay, and in adults, when there is positive screen for coagulopathies, then only we need to go for further treatments. Okay, if we detect some coagulopathies, then all these other high investigations will be indicated as advised by the hematologist. Okay, not routinely. Now, how we reach to the diagnosis? Okay. Now, for example, we are going to today we will be seeing mainly about the groups that is considered under dysfunctional uterine bleeding. Okay, so coagulopathy, ovulatory disorders, endometritis, and iatrogeny. So in all these cases, history is very important. In coagulopathy, usually they present with puberty menorrhagia. Okay, there may be history of easy bruising or petechiae formation, and there will be nothing on the scan, that is ultrasound, everything will be normal. We may find hemorrhagic cyst in some patients because of this bleeding diathesis. Okay, in ovulatory disorder patients, there will be signs of PCO. On USG, there will be thickened endometrium, and usually the uterus size is normal. In endometritis, there may be associated discharge for vagina and cervical erosions. Okay, on ultrasound, there may be fluid in the pouch of Douglas. And usually these patients present with intermenstrual spotting or prolonged spotting, premenstrual or postmenstrual. Okay, and iatrogeny, mainly the copper T users. There we can see the copper T. Okay, and there are usually no other abnormal signs on PP examination. Now, once we have diagnosed that this is abnormal uterine bleeding, we have diagnosed the cause, then our aim is to take care of such lady and to make this lady reach to a cure state. Okay. Now, why we need to treat all these AUB patients? Because this AUB induces anemia. It overall affects negatively on a woman's health. It disturbs the quality of life. It impairs the sexual life. On her work, there are chances of absenteeism and the consequences of it. And many a times the patient may have to face the social embarrassment also. She may start bleeding at any odd points, maybe bleeding heavily without any noticing, and that may lead to a socially embarrassing situations for her. The most important thing is that this abnormal uterine bleeding induces anemia of all the range, that is right from mild, moderate to severe anemia, and it completely affects the quality of life. So we have to treat this AUB. Okay, and what are the goals of treatment? The first and foremost is control the acute bleeding. Second will be correct her anemia and the associated conditions, because we have seen in many of the cases like coagulopathies, They are the associated conditions which are leading to the abnormal uterine bleeding, PCOS. So we need to treat those associated conditions. Third aim of treatment is prevent the recurrence. And once we have treated it, there should not be recurrence. Otherwise, whatever treatment we have given, whatever the correction of anemia has been done, everything will be in vain. And in overall, it should improve the quality of life of a woman. These are the goals of our treatment. The treatment will be affected by these four parts. Or before we formulate the line of management, we have to think over, we have to take care of, or we have to give attention to these four treatment parts. Okay, the first and foremost is the age. So the treatment of AUB will depend upon the age of the patient. In a pubertal girl, the treatment will be different. In a childbearing lady, it will be different. And in a pre and post menopausal woman, the treatment formulated will be different. Same as with fertility. So whether we want to conserve the fertility, conserve the uterus, and whether she wants immediate contraception along with the treatment of AUB, and whether she wants permanent contraception along with it. Okay, so either she wants immediate conception, she wants to conserve, not immediate, but wants to conserve the fertility, or she wants complete contraception along with the treatment of AUB, again will decide the line of management. Third important thing is compliance. Once we are planning for the medical managements, the medical management usually goes along mainly for 6 months or a year. So patient should be highly compliant for taking the drugs, and she should be compliant also for coming for regular follow-ups. If these two things are not there, then we can't formulate any conservative management for such patients. And fourth important thing is the newer modalities. Whatever newer modalities which have been advised or the guidelines say that these should be used for the treatment of AUB, they should be available. For example, the LNG IUCD, levonorgestrel IUCD. It is a treatment of option for many of the causes for AUB, but there should be availability, there should be accessibility, and third is that should be affordability also. So all these types or all these components, factors we need to consider before we formulate any treatment for a case of abnormal uterine bleeding. These are the general guidelines, okay, for the treatment, apart from the specific. So that what are the general guidelines is assessment of hemodynamic condition and blood replacement. So first and foremost is to restore her hemoglobin concentration is the first treatment aim. So assess the hemodynamic stability and then make her stable with blood replacement therapy. And second is counseling of the patient is very, very important. What the counseling is needed for? It's mainly to explain her the risks and benefits of the medical versus surgical treatment. Because in all the cases of AUB, we have got a medical line of management also, and we have got a surgical line of management also. So she should be counseled, and the treatment option should be her decision. Okay. If coagulopathy is suspected, hematologist's reference is always advisable to go in for further clinical workups and for further lab testing to exactly identify the cause so that it can be treated and that will prevent the recurrence of the abnormal uterine bleeding. And whenever we are formulating any medical management, minimum 6 months of trial with this treatment is essential. That also has to be counseled to the patient. Okay. Now, before we plan for the treatment, again, revise once that what we are going to achieve is the treatment we are going to achieve is by controlling the vasoconstriction, platelet aggregation, myometrial contraction, and endometrial regeneration. So we have got to act on these 4 components only for the stoppage of the menstrual cycle. Nothing else is available. And so for this control, we need to have a healthy coagulation system in the patient. There has to be myometrial integrity. There has to be balance of H4 axis, and there has to be prostaglandin balance. So either of these 4 things are problematic that has led to AUB, and our aim will be to restore these systems so that the balance of bleeding can be achieved. So for this, what are the options for us? We have got drugs or we have got a surgical treatment. In the drugs, we have got either the hormonal treatment or the non-hormonal treatment. In the hormones, we have got either progestogens or E plus P, that is estrogen plus progesterone, or GnRH analogs. And in non-hormones, we have got NSAIDs like mefenamic acid, tranexamic acid, and progesterone receptor modulators. And in the surgical, either we have got a conservative approach by doing polypectomies, myomectomies, or endometrial ablations, and if not, then the permanent solution is hysterectomy, but it is always a last option of treatment for AUBs. The patients may come to us in an acute bleeding stage or in a chronic bleeding stage. So when the episode is acute in the first cycle, we call it as acute. But if the episodes are occurring over last 6 months or so, we call it as chronic DOB. So in the acute and severe bleeding, our main first aim is to stop or at least decrease the amount of bleeding. And for that, we have got two choices. Either the medical choice, that is the drugs, or we have got a surgical choice. Okay. So for medical choice, we have either estrogens, progestins, or estrogen plus progestin combination along with tranexamic acid. So tranexamic acid is the base spray. We can give tranexamic acid in the intravenous form also or in the oral form. Either 500 milligram 8 hourly, we can increase the dose up to 1 gram also. The progestins, if we want to stop the bleeding, it has to be a very high dose progestins. So minimum 40 to 60 milligram per day is required to stop the bleeding immediately within 24 hours. And later on, then we can taper the doses, decrease them, and then continue it for another 20-21 days. If you want to use the combined OC pills, then the dose is 2 tablets 3 times till bleeding stops. Here, because we are using along with it estrogens, the chances of side effects of estrogen are more, like nausea, vomitings. Okay, but still this is a good choice. And if the bleeding is very heavy and we want to stop it immediately, or if it is not responding to progestins, then we may have to use conjugated equine estrogens. They are available in IV forms, but the only problem is that we cannot abruptly stop the estrogens, otherwise they will lead to very severe withdrawal bleeding. So all the estrogens, when given, they has to be followed by a adapt progestin therapy. So these are the medical methods available for us. The surgical methods is emergency, dilatation, and curettage. Okay, so just remove the endometrial, whatever has been shedding out completely by curettage, and it may stop the bleeding. Or thermal balloons or endometrial ablations. Both these things are usually for the destruction or destroying of the endometrial lining, so that there will be stoppage of bleeding. But whenever this is not possible, or when the bleeding is from some other reasons like AV malformations, then we may have an option of uterine artery embolization. And in very worst cases, if nothing is available to us, then we may have to go for hysterectomy. Okay. These are all the last option. Now, how the progestins are? The progestins are the mainstay of treatment for medical management of abnormal uterine bleeding. The progestin, in general, it causes structural stability of the endometrium. Okay, so it heals the superficial breaks in the endometrium and it matures the endometrium. The only prerequisite is the endometrium has to be the priming of this endometrium by estrogen. So working of the progestins will only be there if the estrogen receptors or the endometrium is estrogen primed. Okay, and then it causes its effect, and the effect is through modification of the local prostaglandin balance. So it causes vasoconstriction also, and it causes the platelet aggregation and clot formation stimulation also. Okay, it in general inhibits the DNA synthesis and the cell proliferation. So it prevents the endometrial proliferation and also inhibits the angiogenesis, that is formation of the new capillaries in the endometrium. So by these 5-6 mechanisms, all the progestins are not actual original progesterones. These are the substances or the drugs which have got actions similar to progesterone. Okay, they are all synthetically prepared drugs, but they have got actions similar to progesterone, so they are called as progestins. But same time they may have the side effects mainly of the androgenic side effects. Okay, so this is action of progestins. Now it's estrogen. How the estrogen acts? It promotes the platelet aggregation and capillary clotting. It causes vasospasm of the uterine arteries, and it immediately promotes the rapid growth of the endometrial epithelium and stroma also, so that there will be covering of that endometrium breaks and the capillaries are closed and the bleeding stops. Okay, so this is the action of estrogens. Many times we have to combine the therapy, that is estrogen and progesterone combination we have to use. When we use the combination therapy, how both of them act together. Estrogen prevents FSH secretion, progesterone prevents the LH surge and ovulation. Okay, so estrogen prevents the development of the dominant follicle and automatically thus it prevents the LH surge and ovulation. Estrogen provides the endometrial stability. Okay, it provides the stability of the endometrium and it enhances the progesteronal impact. What I was telling, that there has to be priming of the endometrium with estrogens initially, then only there will be action of progesterone. So this estrogen together combination when we are using, that is actually a combined oral pills. Okay, so the patients who are willing for contraception simultaneously, we usually prefer the oral therapy with oral contraceptives. So estrogen and progesterone combined, they together will have a better effect. So all the disadvantages of estrogen, when it is added up with progesterone, they are usually covered, and so progesterone reduces the overall blood loss at the time of withdrawal bleeding, which is usually very heavy when only estrogen is used. When only progesterone is used, this added advantage of contraception we may or may not get. Usually the progesterone creates an atrophic endometrial lining and does it helps in prevention of the implantation, even if there is ovulation and there may be prevention of implantation. Okay, so estrogen and progesterone combined together, they are synergistic in actions and they give a good cycle control and control of the bleeding. So mainly they will be it will be a first line of action or first drugs of choice, especially in patients less than 40 years of age. Okay, so here is the treatment. Okay, so AUB Cohen type, that means coagulation, ovarian dysfunction, endometrial problems, iatrogenic, or where we don't know the reason, where we cannot put that patient into any of the groups. What are the management guidelines? The first and foremost first line management is tranexamic acid. So all the patients with Cohen group, we have to put the patient on tranexamic acid, and there is usually in 50% of the patients, the results are very good control of the bleeding is there. And the second one is the LNG IUCD, because the LNG IUCD, it covers the majority of the added advantages of progestins, and simultaneously it reduces the systemic side effects of the progesterone or progestins. We have seen the systemic side effects are mainly the androgenic compartment, and the estrogen, if we use in together, it has got its own disadvantages. Okay, so we cannot use the estrogens for very long time, long periods. We have to give the break to the patients for treatment. All these things are covered by levonorgestrel IUCDs. They have got a local progesterone release, local action on the endometrium, and it causes local endometrial atrophy, decreases the angiogenesis over there. It heals the superficial breaks in the endometrial lining, and thus it has got a longer effect for control of bleeding very good in patients who are not compliant for follow-ups, okay, and not compliant for taking regular medical tablets. Then the LNG IUCD is the best option for all types of POEN group. If not affordability or of some reason, because this is it goes under an invasive procedure. There has to be a insertion of this IUCD. Many of times this insertion may require a short general anesthesia also. Okay, so if the patient is not willing for all these, she may be patients may have a fear of introducing something inside the uterus. In all these patients, the second line of therapy is combined oral contraceptive pills or cyclic progestins. That means the progestins are given from day 5 of the cycle till day 26 of the cycle. Then the patient has experiences of withdrawal bleeding, and again on day 5 of the withdrawal bleeding, we have to start the progestins. So this is a second add-back may be required, and then specifically progestins are used when there is contraindications for estrogens. But when there are no contraindication for estrogens, combined OCs are the best options for 21 days. Continue the treatment. There will be withdrawal. Again, start with the cycle. So for 6 months to 1 year, and usually the abnormal uterine bleeding is under control. And the third line is mainly the centroman. Here also, again, when the estrogen and progesterone combinations are not tolerated or there are contraindications for them, then centroman can be treatment modality or GnRH agonist with add-back therapy. Specifically, when the steroid hormones are contraindicated, these are the two options for us. Okay, so first line, second line, and third line of action for POEN. And for other option, for other group, that is a PALM group, for polyps, we need a surgical removal. If there are multiple polyps or only the polypoidal endometrium is there, and again, when the patient is willing for fertility conservation. Okay, in such patients, again, LNG IUCD can be an option along with the surgical removal. So remove the polyp and then insert the IUCD, and then we can prevent the recurrence of the polyps. Okay, in adenomyosis, again, if the patients are mainly willing for fertility conservation, LNG IUCD is good option. If not, then the patient may require GnRH agonist with add-back therapy. And if everything fails, then ocipils or progestrogens, but the effects are very less of these two drugs. The better one is the IUS. But these patients usually have simultaneous dysmenorias. So NSAIDs may be required to are helpful for controlling the dysmenorrhea. If there is malignancy, suspected malignancy, then we may have to go for endometrial hyperplasia or surgical treatments, and continued fertility if is not desired, then hysterectomy is the choice. Okay. If there is a typical hyperplasia, then again IUS is intrauterine device of levonorgestrel may be an option, or oral progestins may be an option if the patient is willing for continual fertility preservation. In all other patients, the treatment is hysterectomy. Okay. For fibroids, this is a big chunk of treatment. I think I should not go for a detail of this treatment because it will be covered in your fibroid lectures. But in short, I would like to tell you that in a woman more than 40 years of age, and if the fertility is not desired, then for small fibroids, medical management is essential or hysterectomy. But if the patients are believing or they are interested in conserving the fertility, then the myomectomy is the option. For control of bleeding, the tranexamic acid and NSAIDs is the option. Very small fibroids are there, then even the LNG IUCD can be useful. Okay. The medical option, newer medical options for us, that is medical management of fibroids, that is mifepristol and mifepristol. Okay. And if the submucous myomas are there, then we may have to go for hysteroscopic removal, or if the subserosal ones are there, then there may be the removal abdominally, okay, or laparoscopic removal of leiomyomas. Okay. So just to summarize now, whatever we are learned, AUB is the commonest gynecological complaint. So we need to attend it we have to analyze, examine the patient in detail, do the investigations, group the patient into the categories, and then group wise there has to be management. Okay, there may be that two of the things may be overlapping. Okay, so in the classification of AUB, the patient may be having simultaneously, she may be having a fibroid also and adenomyosis also. She may be having ovulatory dysfunction also, and simultaneously she may be having endometrial hyperplasia also. Okay, so there may be overlapping of two conditions or more than two conditions may be there. Okay, but simultaneously we have to manage all the two or three conditions. DUB is an older terminology. Nowadays we don't use the terminology of DUB, but this older terminology reflects actually the Cohen group of the recent FIGO classification. Okay, so the Palm-Cohen classification is compulsory for all the categorizations of abnormal uterine bleeding. Okay, in Cohen it may include a primary or secondary type of DUB. Secondary DUB means associated with IUCDs or with drugs, and primary is usually the ovarian or the endometrial pathologies. Okay, the management of AUB, it depends upon the classification, in which group the AUB goes, the age of the patient. So the treatments will differ in an adolescent girl, in a childbearing age, in a premenopausal lady, in a postmenopausal lady. Okay, fertility conservation is a very important issue to be considered when we want to treat AUB. Compliance and availability of the newer methods has to be given a thought before we plan the management. Okay. Even the surgical options, if they are available or not available, like endometrial resections. So if they are available, then definitely we can go for. But if we don't have any choice, then we may have to go for the last option, that is hysterectomy. Okay. So these are the things to be summarized. I request all of you to go through the books, your standard books which you are referring, that is the Datta and Shaw's books for gynecology. Read AUB, and if any doubts are there, all of you can anytime communicate with me for the cause solving. Okay, so thank you for your listening. Hope you understood and enjoyed the lecture. Thank you.